Okay, well thanks for having a look at this video. Basically I'm looking at recovering or covering a guitar amplifier box. Let's say it's a Fender Deluxe 5E3 Clone, which I've made out of pine. Now I've ordered and received the Tweed material, which is, yeah, it's okay, but it's quite tricky to work with. What I've just looked at doing is looking at the best way of applying the tweed to the box without damaging the tweed, and something which is quick and effective. I've basically outlay some tools and some other bits and pieces like measuring tape or a ruler, double-sided tape, special tissue tape, scissors, good quality scissors, little Twinkie tweezers, and a few other bits and pieces. Now the material itself is quite a nice material. You can see it's basically double-sided. It doesn't have a backing. Some people talk about the tweed having a backing, a paper backing. This has nothing. It's basically the same both sides. I think it's a synthetic material because it doesn't respond to the iron terribly well. You need to be very careful when ironing that you don't burn it, or it's very prone to sticking, so you need to be careful in that respect. You can see here in this darker shade here where I've tried gluing the tweed to the backing, and it's basically bled through onto the material and it's left a permanent stain there. Absolutely dissatisfied with that result. That was using a PVA wood glue, which some people recommend. I don't recommend it. It's incredibly difficult to get right. You basically have to prep the wood with glue to begin with, let it dry, and then put on another coat very evenly. Very hard to distribute it that evenly, and then get the cloth to adhere to it. It does stick to it really well, but this staining is a problem. I've tried using things like contact adhesive. I'm not satisfied with contact adhesive, but I do have something else which is much better than all these other alternatives that no one talks about. Now, I've used contact cement over the years for lots of cabinet covering jobs with vinyl, Tilexy type materials, and it works okay. But after having tried to use it on this sort of project, it's just not satisfactory. It's too much bleeding through the fabric and it's really hard to control. You can't move anything afterwards. I thought of maybe using hide glue, but that's got its problems as well. And I had a good think about what I could use instead, and what I came up with was this material, which is a tissue double-sided tape. There's actually a layer of tape on the material, on that plastic backing, a very sticky, thin layer of double-sided tape. Absolutely brilliant. They use this sort of stuff for doing the hood liners in the auto industry, things like upholstering the doors, that sort of thing, and it just works brilliantly. I don't know why I hadn't thought of it earlier, and it's quite controllable. You can apply the tape and then you can peel off the backing layer as you go. It's really nice stuff. You can set things up and then just ease your way through the project, which we'll show a bit later. You can buy this stuff in packing type companies, or even online. I've seen it advertised, especially with this orangey backing that it has. Absolutely great stuff. About $15 Australian for that roll, which I think is pretty good value. And I've already completed a cabinet already, and that's how much is left over. Now I've cut the material, pre-cut it to the shape of each part, the sides, the top, the bottom, so it reaches everywhere it needs to go. I've got a little bit left over, but not much, out of a 2 metre by 2 yard, so a 2 metre by 54 inch, if that's confusing, piece of material. It'll basically mean I can cover 2 cabs quite nicely, but there's not a lot to spare. If you make mistakes, if you make a big mistake, you might have to see yourself buying more material, which just costs a lot more money, and it's just a real hassle. So you need to work out how much material you need. There's different ways of doing that. There's lots of other websites or YouTube videos which show how to measure the pieces off. I'm fairly haphazard, so I'm not the greatest person to demonstrate how to get the most out of cloth, but in this particular case I do have enough left over. And now you have a piece which is stuck on quite firmly. That's just the one side at the moment. The beauty of this stuff too is there's no smell, there's no dirty brushes. You don't have to race around thinking, oh, that's, you know, I've got to wait for it to dry, then I've got to cover one side, then cover the material and wait for it all to tack up and give it another coat if it hasn't quite worked out properly. It's just so much cleaner and more controllable. Now if you're having trouble actually getting this tape off, this is where these little tweezer type pliers come in really handy. They're very dexterous at grabbing the edge of that paper, and then you can pull it off. A little bit of dag there, but I'll fix that in a second. You can just grab it, pull it off, nice and easy. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail about covering the actual material. It's covered in a lot of other videos and people redoing Tolex, that sort of stuff. You know, it comes down to what does a job, and how you present it is really up to yourself. Obviously you want to do a nice job. Fender didn't do a terribly good job at covering their goods. No better than the average Joe, really. It's speed and money is really their biggest issue. But as far as covering it, you just pull it over and press down onto the glue. Nice, I say, but all the time in the world really, because this glue isn't going off. It will stay sticky. Just to show you there, pulling a bit off, it's quite firm. I'm not going to stress it too much at this stage, but it is at least as good as the wood glue idea. It's probably nearly as good as the old animal glue which Fender used, and its longevity is probably quite good too. Seeing it's the type of stuff they use in the car industry, I could imagine you could easily get 10 or more years out of it. I don't think there's going to be an issue there. Probably the time that you get out of this adhesive is about as long as what the material is going to look good for. So I don't think you're going to have any problems there if it losing its stick later on. Now, while I sing the praises of this material and this glue on this double-sided tape, if you do make a mistake and you're trying to peel something off, it's really hard to get off. It leaves a nasty residue. So a word of advice: if you make a mistake, you're probably going to lose that piece of tweed because it just feathers and tears everywhere, and it's just really messy and hard to control. So try not to let something go down before you're ready for it. So there we have our first piece. It's not pretty on the back, but none of these things ever are. You don't actually look on that side of the panel. You're only looking from that side. Looks good. Just give any little dags or bits of fluff on the corners, a bit of a trim with a nice pair of sharp scissors. Don't be afraid of borrowing the other half's or your mother's good scissors, because you need the best scissors that money can buy for this job. Believe me, you cannot afford to use second grade scissors. Spend $40–50 and you're doing yourself a favour, believe me. What I find useful when you're doing the internal corners like this, basically you cut the angles of those, but rather than pull on the tabs of these, that material breaks really easily. So I'm finding that if you just roll your finger in and just tuck it under like that, it works just as well as pulling it through. What I'm also doing with the panel that goes behind the actual chassis is using this aluminium foil tape. It's reinforced with glass fibre, used in roofing to tape the isolation together. I'm using it as basically as a shield for hum, that sort of thing. So basically when the amp goes in, there'll be a connected to this material, which hopefully stops some of the hum that might be hanging around. So there, now we have a completed back panel, which is right to be put aside. Bit of stick there still, but in effect that'll actually get coated with the polyurethane anyway, so that'll probably lose its stick once it's sprayed over anyway, so I'm not too concerned about that. I've pre-cut all the pieces. These are side pieces that will go on. Now please make sure that you iron the material when you get it, because if it's got creases in it, the glue may not remove those creases. Now these are the top and bottom panels. Again, you've got to maintain that 10 to 4 direction. Now with these edges here, you have to get a pair of electronics, good strong goggles, something like these if you need to, if your eyesight isn't great, because after a while of cutting this stuff by hand, your eyes start crossing over and you literally can't see straight. So I found that I just had to very, very carefully cut through. A nice pair of scissors like these. These are good Fiskars type. There's other brands you can get, of course. But to carefully cut along that edge and not to leave any jagged edges. I've made one cabinet where I haven't done that, and it's really easy to see. You wouldn't think so, because that is very, very small, that material, the actual thread that goes through, but it's important that you cut along only one side. And what I've done is I've measured got another piece here, I've measured the width that it has to cover. It will come over there. I cut one side, made sure it was right, measured it, and cut the other side very carefully, and it's right to go. Not a nice job. Do it when you're nice and fresh and awake, because if you don't, you'll leave a jagged edge and you'll regret it.